Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Can you see me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon. Yeah.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Hari Om, Hari.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the continuation of the discussion on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. So if you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, there will be a question and answer segment at the end of the discussions. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Also, please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. If you are not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Prajwal, and welcome back. So, good evening. So, we are continuing a discussion on this very interesting philosophical system, Madhvacharya system. So now, when we listen to these different interpretations of Vedic mantras, Vedic sounds, we have to keep in mind two important factors. One, this Vedic language is a somewhat irregular kind of language. Irregular in the sense it belongs to an era which is before the standardization of Sanskrit grammar. So Sanskrit grammar got standardized. It was its fundamental rules of syntax and grammar, philological analysis, they were all fixed and standardized around 9th century BC by the great grammarian Panini. And what we find in Vedic language is a kind of language system that preceded Panini by at least 3,000, 4,000 years. So, one of the earliest thinkers on Vedic language, one of the early commentators, we may call, who specialized in Vedic hermeneutics and Vedic linguistics or philology, whatever we may call, makes a very interesting statement that actually rules the entire process of interpreting Vedic sounds. Not Sanskrit language, Vedic sounds. Remember, Vedic language precedes what we now call Sanskrit at least by 3,000 years. Not entirely different from modern Sanskrit, but its grammatical structure was somewhat irregular. So, the same word can have different meanings depending upon the context and also depending upon the particular ceremony or Vedic ritual in which that mantra which contains those words were uttered. So I can quote the words of a great commentator, Madhvacharya, who wrote a commentary on a later work, a work that was little before Panini. So he says, Sarvesham Shabdanam Dhatu Dhatunam Anegarthatvam cha. What it means is, all sounds originate with a root. And the root can have any number of variations. Now that will not be acceptable in the eyes of a modern grammarian like Panini and others. But whenever Panini refers to this pre-Paninian, Panini is the name of the great grammarian who standardized the syntax and grammar of Sanskrit. So whenever he refers to the early patterns and usages of Sanskrit used in Vedic Samhitas. He uses the word ashatvat sadhu. Sadhu means appropriate, acceptable, what do you call received. Modern, RP, received pronunciation. But it's only something that refers to pronunciation, not entire language system in modern English. A received usage, it is acceptable, it is appropriate, because that usage was done by, the usage goes back to the days of the ancient sages. So, ashatva means rishipraktatva, means these words were uttered by the great saints of ancient times, so it is appropriate. So you can imagine the concept of linguistic correctness goes far beyond the rigid principles of grammar and syntax. So the same commentator Dvaita says, for example, he says, Prakarana Vaividyat Pravaktuhu Vaividyacha Anegarthatva, means depending upon the context and depending upon the person who is using it, a word can have its specific connotations. This is a very important principle. Now, if you look at the history of modern English, because English is the language spoken, not American is the language spoken here. When you talk about the, let's say, pre-American English, let's say, English language, its structure was practically more or less standardized by the authors of the King James Version of the Bible, and its phonetic patterns were standardized by Daniel Jones in the early decades of 20th century. So you can imagine the antiquity of Sanskrit language. So here, one of the earliest thinkers who lived long before Panini is Katyayana. He says, Arthat Prakaranat Autityad Deshakalataka Mantreshu Artha Vivegat Siyad Idareshu Idicha Sthiti. It's a famous statement. So this gentleman, this great sage, great grammarian, says, and these sages elevated language into the status of a divine tool for expressing spiritual ideas. So he says arthat. So how do you interpret the meaning of a Vedic sound? So Katyayana says arthat, depending upon the sense. Remember, sense, not meaning. Sense is very important. Meaning anyone can take from dictionary. But sense is frequently the creation of the speaker and the context and the overall situation in which that word is uttered. Because sense implies something that goes far beyond the dictionary meaning of a word. So arthat, arthadi the arthat, what is implied, what is the implication, the sense of the word. Prakarana, the context. Prakarana means context, the universal dialogue, maybe depending upon the particular, maybe it's used in a particular dialogue or in the context of a particular ritual where a word is used to indicate some kind of a ritual. So the meaning, not the meaning, rather the sense depends upon the context and also the implication. Auchityat. Auchitya means propriety. So propriety is also very important. Lingad. Linga means indicatory words. Linga means certain words constitute a metaphor something, and allegories and so on. And then auchityad. Auchitya means propriety. What should be the meaning or the sense of the particular word, the proper meaning or the proper sense of the particular word used in the particular context. And then time-space matrix, so to call time and space matrix. That is Deshakalataka. I mean the place the time. So all these factors are involved. Idi mantreshu artha viveka syad. So artha viveka means a proper discerning wisdom in interpreting the meaning of a mantra, a Vedic shabda, Vedic sound. These are the criteria to be kept in mind. That's a great observation of the Katyayana, the ancient sage and linguist. And he says, itereshu iticha sthiti. Not only in the context of Vedic mantras, but in all other contexts also the same principle applies. Keeping in this mind, we will go to Madhva. So how Madhva takes liberty in interpreting Vedic mantras. So when you try to impose your view on a Vedic mantra, what happens? Propriety is gone. And then artha viveka means finding the right meaning in a proper, acceptable manner. Now, I mentioned earlier that in the philosophy of Madhvacharya, this Panchabheda Siddhanta is very, very important. I already mentioned earlier. Just in case some of you must have forgotten, it is one of the fundamental doctrines of Madhvacharya's philosophy. It's called Panchabheda Siddhanta. Before going to the real authentic statement, I shall try to explain what it is. You think of a triangle. On the top there is God. On one side there is matter of the world. On the other side there are living beings or self. So Ishvara, Jiva, Jagat. Jagat means this phenomenal world or matter. Jiva means living beings. And Ishvara means God, the idea of God. Now Madhvacharya says there are eternal and fundamental differences among different objects in this world, among different living beings in this world, and also between different objects and different living beings, between different living beings among themselves, and different objects in the phenomenal world, and between different objects and God, and different living beings and God. Jiva and Ishvara, between different Jivas, Ishvara and Jagat, and among different objects in this Jagat, and between Jagat and Jiva. That means all the 5 conceivable differences of these 3 points of the triangle. So he says, Jiveshwara bhida chaiva, Jadeshwara bhida tatha, Jiva bhedo mitaschaiva, Jada jiva bhida tatha. Midascha jada bhedoya, prapancho bheda panchaka. It's called bheda panchaka, means 5 fundamental differences. Soyam satyovanadascha syadisched nashamapniyat. So this is his fundamental. That means all conceivable kinds of differences. Now, we have to think of this difference. What exactly is the true meaning of this difference according to Madhvacharya? There are different statements, and one of Madhvacharya's most important work is called Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya. In other words, a proper understanding, discussion, analysis of the true implication or the concept of Vishnu as the ultimate God idea, God concept. And there is a Tika, this is Madhvacharya's book, and one of the post-Madhva philosophers called Jayatirtha, who wrote Tikas or commentaries on Madhvacharya's books. He wrote a commentary on this Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya Tika. Now, in this book, Madhvacharya, in this original work, that is Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya, Madhvacharya discusses the different divine qualities of Vishnu and the principle of Vishnu, and then Vishnu's divine body, the all-pervading nature, and Vishnu is conceived to be the Sarvottama. Uttama Purushastu Anya Paramatma iti Udakara in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 15th chapter, Purushottama Yoga, you find. Vishnu is Sarvottama or Purushottama. So, the highest, most exalted kind of anthropomorphism, that's what you find in Madhva Siddhanta. So, there are very interesting statements in this Tika, that is Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya Tika by Jayatirtha. Bhedohi na swatantra pratiyade kindu ghatapat visheshtaya tad visheshitaya cha tatha cha ghatapato idiva ghatapato idiva ditva avachinnayoha ghatapato visheshana visheshya bhava pratidischa bheda pratidi apeksha visheshana pratitehe visheshyadi pratidi karyatva visheshana visheshya bhava pratidischa bheda pratidi apeksha tatha cha anyonyasrayata, the mutual dependence. Now, this language is slightly different, so I shall try to explain this. A little bit of a complicated Sanskrit, so I shall try to explain this. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do right now. What Madhvacharya says is this. What is the concept of Bheda? What is this idea of difference? I shall try to explain this concept of Bheda by taking illustrations or from Madhvacharya's own interpretations of the mantras in the Chandogya Upanishad, in which Tattvamasi, according to Madhvacharya, Atattvamasi, is described. I mean, Jiva is not the same as Ishvara. Jiva is different, Bheda, Bhinna, from Ishvara. That Bheda or non-identity or difference or non-identity is emphasized and stressed again and again by Madhvacharya. So I shall try to give the illustrations, which many of these illustrations are in the form of analogies and very graphic illustrations of wonderful examples taken from human life and also from nature. So anyway, we are coming to that. Now before that, it should be kept in mind, Madhvacharya went through all the works of the great Advaitic dialecticians, like Mandana, who wrote Brahmasiddhi, and his later incarnation is Siddheswaracharya. He wrote Brihadaranyaka Upanishad Bhashyavartigam. Vimuktatman, who wrote Ishtasiddhi. Actually, Vimuktatman, Madhvacharya as a young man was studying Ishtasiddhi under a teacher, and he quarreled with the teacher and he opposed Vimuktatman's view expressed in Ishtasiddhi, and then he eventually went on to create this Dvaita philosophy. Anandabodha, who wrote the Nyaya Deepavali, and then Srikasha, who wrote Khandana Khandakadya, and also Chitsuka Acharya, who wrote Tattva-pratipika, this is all Chitsuki, all these books. So he went through all these great dialectical works of Advaitins. And then he says, wherever you find in the Vedic mantras, in the Upanishad mantras, wherever you find that is difficult to establish this concept of difference. Difference means everything is different from everything else. Just the polar opposite of the Advaitins' view that there is one supreme divine reality. That alone is the absolute reality, Paramarthika Sattva. Everything else is only manifestation of name and form, which again is illustrated in the Chandogya Upanishad. So, according to Madhvacharya, he says, if we cannot find any logical possibility in establishing difference, then you should look for new methods to establish difference, because difference is what we experience. I shall give an example. Okay, we'll come to that. There is one illustration in the Chandogya Upanishad. For example, a honeybee, or maybe this, a honeybee goes about collecting, or different honeybees go about collecting honeys from different plants, different flowers, different trees. And finally, it equally Madhvacharya Drishtanta, the illustration of honeybee. Somebody who creates honey. So all these honeybees, they go to different plants and flowers and collect honey. And then, when the honey itself is made, that honey loses its separate identities. The honey, they may have brought, the honeybees must have brought honey from mango plant, from other plants, different kinds of plants, different kinds of honeys are brought together, and they all become one single reality. Now it is called honey. Now the point is, when they all become one honey entity, it loses its independent identities. Honey must have come from different plants, but these differences are totally irrelevant. Single honey. The honey doesn't recognize, I came from mango tree, I came from another plant. No. Like that, in the Chandogya Upanishad, this statement, the famous mantra is there in the Chandogya 6th chapter. Saya esha anima aidadatmimidam sarvam tas satyam sa atma tattvamasi Shvedaketu. The great teacher Uddalaka is teaching Shvedaketu. So to illustrate this example is given, and Shankaracharya says, all become one. Like that, in deep sleep, when our mind, our senses, all of them become non-functional, we become unconsciously identified with one supreme reality, but without being aware of this. So at that time, we are indirectly experiencing the reality of oneness of existence. This happens in Sushupti or deep sleep. It doesn't mean that deep sleep is the highest spiritual enlightenment, not at all. But gives an idea of what it is like, transcending or going beyond all duality. Now, what I said was, different honey units coming from different plants, they lose their different identities, they become merged with one single honey entity. So Shankaracharya says, this is an illustration of the unity and oneness of, the spiritual unity and oneness of existence. Madhvacharya says no. He says, they all come from different entities, different honeys. But they are different, though at that time they are not able to understand the difference. Still, they are not the same, they are different. So, the illustration is called Madhvacharya Drishtanta. So, Madhvacharya says, this illustration conveys Jiva's dependence on God and his distinction from it. The essence means the madhu, the honey, or different trees and plants remain together. They remain together in the honey, but they are not aware of one another. Similarly, jivas, different living beings, are with God, but they are still different from them. So, unity is put upside down. That is Madhvacharya's view. Of course, in this interpretation, there are some important principles to be kept in mind. According to the traditional Vedantic hermeneutics, there are six important qualities, important criteria to be kept in mind when you interpret a scripture. That is, its introduction, its conclusion, upakrama, upasamhara. Then the idea that is repeated again and again. And then something unique in that book. And then what is stated as the result of understanding, reading that book. These are the criteria for deciding the essence, the central theme of any scripture or any canon. Abhyasa apurvada, that means upakrama upasamkhara abhyasa apurvada phalam arthavadupapatija lingam talparya nirnaye. 6 indications in understanding the essence. That is introduction, conclusion, what is repeated again and again, that is repetition, abhyasa. Then what is unique in that book, apurvada, phala means the result that is stated. Then what is being eulogized, praised. A central idea is again and again exalted and praised. And also the logical analysis, what is logically stated as a theme of the book. Many ideas may be stated. So, keeping all these 6 factors, we should decide the central theme of a book. Madhvacharya says that in the Chandogya Upanishad, there are statements again and again, this statement of Tattwamasi. That is, Madhvacharya says it is Atattwamasi. Tattwamasi means you are that. Atattva means you are not that. So everyone is different from everything else. Now, when this advice is given to Swetaketu by Uddalaka, Swetaketu goes on requesting his father to repeat this instruction again and again. And Uddalaka repeats the first statement, then 8 repetitions with 8 fresh examples. And Madhvacharya says, this itself shows that the real implication is that you are not that. Anyway, we'll come to that. So, I'm just coming to this central principle. So, Madhvacharya says, it will be totally wrong to give up the attempt if you are not able to logically analyze and explain the difference that we experience. So even if there are statements which show unity, we should remember that the unity we do not see in this world. We see everything is different from everything else. So that's why he says, actually this statement in another very interesting book, that is Mithyatva Anumana Khandanam. Mithyatva Anumana means this Madhvacharya wrote some very, very strong dialectical works completely refuting the concept of mithya. And Jayatirtha, one of the great commentators of Madhva tradition, he wrote Mithyatva Anumana Khandana Tika. And there he says, Nahi prakriya parikshayo vastu parikshayat balavan. But he says it will be totally wrong, totally unphilosophical to give an attempt to explain and to illustrate and to emphasize difference, even if you cannot find it. So if logical difficulties are felt in elucidating the process by which he can establish difference, then we should go beyond the accepted theories. That's what. So, just giving an example of Madhvacharya's emphasis on distinction. If Shankara emphasized on unity and oneness, Madhvacharya, going to polar extreme, says he insisted, emphasized the difference in everything. Difference is what we normally experience. But when we evolve in spiritual life, then we find the difference is there, but that difference is only relative. This is an important thing. So this also actually made Madhvacharya to insist on the continuation of all rituals even after getting the highest spiritual experience. According to Shankaracharya, Karma Yoga, practicing Karma Yoga, practicing our everyday duty without a selfish motive, it's called Karma Yoga. It's called Karma Nishtha. That is helpful for eventually to go beyond, for going beyond karma. So karma will actually take us beyond karma. You perform, karma here means, in Shankaracharya's language, karma means Sauda Smarta karmas. What it means is certain rituals to be performed by people in their house, as part of their household responsibilities, which they should continue through their lifetime. Shankaracharya says, when you reach the highest spiritual realization, you don't give up karma, but you go beyond karma. Nice karma siddhi. Madhvacharya doesn't accept that. So he insists that even after the highest spiritual enlightenment or liberation, one should adhere to all the theological canons, all the rules and regulations with regard to formal rituals and practices. So his statement is there, Atita Anagata Jnani Trailokya Uddharana Kshama Edadrishopi Nacharam Saudam Smartam Cha Parityajet. So Saudam Smartam Karma Na Parityajet. That is his thesis. We should never give up the rituals and duties and responsibilities which are stated in the Srutis and Smritis, which are enjoined for every single person. So you should perform all the formal ceremonies and rituals. Shankaracharya did not reject rituals, but he says one should go beyond rituals. You should go to primary school. For what? You should get a high grade in the examination so that you can go to college. You are not going to primary school to continue studying the primary school all your lifetime, to go beyond it. But Madhvacharya says, no, you should. I know this may create problems for those who rigidly adhere, fanatically adhere to Madhva Siddhanta. But in modern time, this is not a very big dialectical problem. But it is a common sense also. At the beginning, one may go to kindergarten and study the alphabet. So when you study the alphabet, maybe in some kindergartens I've seen they give a big screen. So children are given a huge piece of chalk or something, and they write on the big board A. That's how they learn. Or maybe in these classrooms also, kindergarten also, they do that. But you don't do that when you are a professor in the university. You don't do that. So you are going to kindergarten because you want to go beyond kindergarten. But according to Madhvacharya, Atita Anagata Jnani Trailokyo Kshamah Edadrishovi. So even if a great jnani, a great spiritually enlightened person, who is capable of spiritually reforming this world, three worlds, that literal meaning, spiritually reforming three worlds, I mean heaven, earth, and of course the nether world. That he says, Nitna Acharam, Saudam Smartam Parityajet. He should not give up the rituals and ceremonies. That is Madhvacharya's statement. Now, this is the important point. Now, I am coming to the subject, to the Veda. I mean, I already mentioned, really we are coming to the subject. So, we are coming to a very important subject, that is Chandogya Upanishad. Those of you who may not have the book with you, but this is being recorded, so you can, when later on when you study, when you listen to it, you can You can listen to this, maybe if you are interested, keeping a copy of the Chandogya Upanishad. Chandogya Upanishad, 6th chapter, mantra, 4th, 5th and 6th. Three mantras are there, which gives three types of illustrations, which actually form the foundation. So the point is, Yatha Soumya Ekena Mritpindena Sarvam Brahmayam Vijnadam Syat Vacharampanam Vikaro Namadeyam Mrittiga Ityeva Satyam Yatha Soumya Ekena Lokamanina Sarvam Lokamayam Vijnadam Syat Vacharampanam Vikaro Namadeyam Lokamityeva Satyam Yatha Soumya Ekena Nakha Nigrundanena Sarvam Kashnayasam Vijnadam Syat Vacharampanam Vikaro Namadeyam Krishnaya Samityeva Satyam Evam Soumya Sa Adesho Bhavati Iti. This is a mantra. What it means is very simple. In the previous statement, there is a story background. It's a very interesting story. Uddalaka was a great teacher. So this Uddalaka used to go to different Vedic schools to teach students. He used to travel to far off places. And he had already given instructions to one of his friends who was also a great Vedic scholar, because he will be traveling to other places for teaching students in different Vedic schools. He sent his own son to a distant Vedic school where one of his own friends, another Vedic teacher, was teaching. So after 12 years of Vedic studies, Swetaketu, his son, returned home. So Uddalaka, one day he returned from his home, from his responsibilities, he returned home and he wanted to find out how far his son is progressing in Vedic education. So when he tried to talk to his son, he found his son was very haughty and proud. So he asked him, why are you so haughty and proud? If you go to some distant university and after some years you return, sometimes people have an inflated idea of going abroad and getting a degree from Oxford, and then they won't care for their own parents, that sort of thing happens. So here, Om Shetaketu Aruneya Sasatam Abhi Pitovacha Shvetaketu Vasa Brahmacharyam Navai Somyasmar Kulino Na Anucha Brahmabundriva Bhavadidi. So one day he asked his son, in our family there was no one who did not study the Vedas. You should do justice to your lineage, so you go and study. And he arranged, and then Dvadasa Varsha Upetya Chaturvimshadi Varsha Sarvan Vedan Adhitya. So the boy studied for 12 years and he came Mahamana Anuchanamani Stabdhayaya. He became very haughty and proud. And then Uddalaka asked his son, you are so haughty and proud. Did you study that by knowing which everything that is unknown becomes known? So, Yena Sudam Sudam Bhavati Amadam Madam Abhijnadam Vijnadam Iti. Did you study that by studying which everything becomes known? All that is unknown becomes known. All that is not contemplated becomes properly understood and contemplated. Did you study that by knowing which everything becomes known? And the son said, no, I have never heard of such a thing. The story goes beyond that. The Shankaracharya's Bhashya gives some interesting details, because the story appears in some of the Purana. So Shankaracharya says, the son also said, I am such a wonderful, intelligent fellow, so my teacher may not know what you are talking about. If he had known, he would have taught me. So that much, Shankaracharya is adding some important details. And then Uddalaka is giving an illustration. So he gives these three illustrations. One is clay and clay pot. The other illustration is gold nugget and golden ornaments. The third illustration is nail cutter and iron objects. So what he's saying is, If you know the nature of clay, then you will know the nature of all utensils, pots and pans made of clay. If you know gold, then you will know the nature, the properties of all golden ornaments. Similarly, if you know the nature of iron, then you will know all the properties of all different utensils or different tools, tools used for farming and things made of iron. You don't have to take every single golden coin to understand the property, because of course a golden coin may be a good example. Let's say you need not analyze all the different pots and pans made of clay to understand the properties of clay, because they are made of the same clay. Now the point is, Madhvacharya says that two clay pots are eternally and fundamentally different from each other. Shankaracharya says, no, they are different, but that difference is only at the relative level. When you are using the clay pot, let's say for storing water, when you are using a clay cup for drinking water, there are certainly two different utensils, two different entities used for two different purposes. But then the pot maker, the same pot maker, made the clay pot and also the clay cup from the same clay. Before it was turned into a clay pot or clay cup, it was only clay only or soil only. Before it was turned into golden ring and golden necklace, it was gold only. Before somebody made a nail cutter from iron, it was only iron ore. Maybe in the early days, iron ore then processed and became iron. Essentially it's iron only. But there is a difference. You don't use a nail cutter for plowing. Maybe you don't use it for cutting a wood. For that you need an axe made of iron. That's true. Now the point is, according to Dvaita, this difference is relative, not absolute. So it is called Vyavaharika. Vyavaharika means at the practical common sense level, with regard to the practical utility level. That's true. A clay pot is different from a jar made of clay. A nail cutter is different from an axe made of iron. The nail cutter is made of iron and the axe also made of iron, but to different purposes. So Madhvacharya says their fundamental values in practical life, utility value, makes them two fundamentally different entities. Because he does not accept the distinction between the Paramarthika and Vyavaharika, the absolute and the empirical, the relative. So this illustration, Madhvacharya's interpretation that a golden ring is fundamentally and essentially different from a golden necklace, and Shankaracharya's interpretation that they are not fundamentally different, they are different only in a relative term, for at the empirical level. That those two different views eventually led to two different kinds of interpretations of the mantras in the Chandogya Upanishad. Now we are giving an example. Another example is there. It is called Shaguni Sutra Drishtanta. The example is that, of course, I can just, those who are interested, you can later read this mantra. Of course, it comes in the Chandogya Upanishad, 6th chapter, 8th khanda or 8th section. A mantra, I think this mantra is, the second mantra of eighth section of sixth chapter of Chandogya Upanishad. The mantra is about a bird. It's a bird tied by a string, flying in various directions and not able to find shelter anywhere. It eventually takes refuge at the very place itself where it is tied, fastened to a tree. Similarly, the mind, human mind, wandering from one direction to another, doesn't find shelter anywhere. Eventually takes refuge in prana, for the mind is tied to prana. This is here prana here means sat, the absolute reality, and mind is jivatma. Now the mantra is this: Sayatha Shakunihi Sutrena Prabudho Disham Disham Paditva Anyatra Ayatanam Alabdhva Bandhanameva Upasayate Evameva Khalu Soumya Tanmano Disham Disham Paditva Anyatra Ayatanam Alabdhva Pranameva Upasayate Pranabandhanam Ki Soumya Mana Iti. This is the mantra. So what it means is, so you can think of this example. Our mind, like jiva, individual jiva, this Advaitic interpretation, then we will talk to Madhva interpretation. How Madhva brings difference or Bheda into this, and how Shankaracharya brings unity and oneness. So take the same story. According to Dvaita, mind goes to different places. Like the bird that is tied to a tree, or maybe in some modern illustration, if you suppose a ship is moving in the mid-ocean and a bird is tied by a thread to some black moss, one of to a point in the ship, and then the bird goes about flying in all directions. Eventually it finds there is no other way, some mid-ocean, so it has to come down, come to the very place where it is tied. Similarly, the human mind, like the bird, in the morning and evening, day and night, mind goes in all directions. Our eyes, our ears, our sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of taste, all the five senses, drag the mind into all directions, seeing different things, hearing different things, smelling different things, tasting different things, and mind is going on, traveling everywhere. It goes in, it takes on a big tour in foreign lands, not its own place, but in strange lands. Finally, the mind realizes, well, it's not my place, and eventually it comes back to its own home. Here, the mind is all individual jivas, and the place where it is tied is Atman, Sat. It mentioned prana in this story. So Shankaracharya says, our true essence, our true nature is Atman. The prana is Sat, mana is the individual Jivatma. So the passage proclaims the dependence of individual soul on Brahman. Dependence in the sense, all of us, we feel that we are at home only when we return to our own true nature. In many Advaitic books, you can find Advaitic dialecticians. They give an example. There is in all of us an urge for something sublime, something universal, something big. Bhuma, it is called in Vedanta, in the Chandogya Upanishad, Bhuma Vidya. There is an important teaching tradition, the Bhuma Vidya in New Science. The science of the great, science of the grand. So we have a natural tendency to go beyond the narrow, beyond the small, beyond the limited, natural tendency on earth to go in search of something transcendental, something universal, something grand. Till then, we don't feel inner contentment, especially more refined people. So, in this particular passage, you will find, if you read, you find Sushupti or deep sleep is given as an illustration. In deep sleep, our mind returns to its real home. It stops all wandering. All external objects are gone. We have given 144 lectures on the Mandukya Karika and Mandukya Upanishad. You can see on our website. This subject also comes under discussion in a very elaborate form, elaborate fashion. So the point is, all of us have this tendency to come back to our home and to experience the unity and oneness with our true nature. But a person, when he goes to deep sleep, when we feel total restfulness, we are unconsciously experiencing this unity and identity with our true nature. It shows Tattwamasi, you are that, the absence of difference between Brahman and Jiva. Now Madhvacharya says, no. This passage shows that Jiva is dependent upon Brahman because Jiva is created by Brahman. Jiva is created by God. Mind is created by prana. That's in this taking the context. So Madhvacharya says, if Jiva is created by God, then Jiva and God are not the same. And Advaita doesn't say God and Jivatma are the same. What Advaita tells you is, the reality of God as supreme spiritual principle is present in all of us. And when we go beyond our identity with the senses and mind and thoughts and emotions and feelings, then we feel this identity and oneness with our true nature. That's what Advaita says. So, in the Chandogya Upanishad, the student Shvetaketu took a long time to actually experience the essence of his father's teaching, Tattwamasi. So, each of these illustrations is explained by Madhvacharya as a proof for difference. And each of these illustrations, Shankaracharya, shows the truth of unity and oneness of existence. Now we will continue in the next session. You can have interaction. You are most welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank
No
you.
hands are up yet. I have a question.
Yeah.
And you spoke early on about the Vedic language.
Yeah, yeah.
And some of the scholars,
Yeah.
the philology of Vedic language spoke
Yeah.
about different contexts for the language and
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah.
Etc. Now, when we attend a puja and we hear Vedic chanting, followed by references to more modern scriptural texts, are we then seeing some of the interplay between the Vedic language and its philology that you were describing, and the later science of Sanskrit language and philology from Panini? Are we seeing that history in modern times?
Yeah. Could you repeat once more? Excuse me, once more.
Well, because our pujas include Vedic language,
Yeah.
as well as the classic Sanskrit
Yeah.
mantras,
Yeah.
are we then, in a way, experiencing in today's time
Yeah.
the interplay between Vedic language and how its science was described as quite contextual,
Yeah.
and the later more settled science of Sanskritology?
Yeah.
Are we seeing that in modern times when we attend the puja?
No, true. Interpreting a sound or a word strictly in terms of context and also the person who uses it in reality, going beyond the scope of philology and linguistics and language as such, even in ordinary common sense, a word and its sense have a lot to do with the person who speaks and the context in which the word is spoken. So when Durgacharya says pravaktuhu vaividyat and prakarana vaividyat, pravaktuhu vaividya means variation and diversity in terms of the person who uses the word. Prakarana vaidya means contextual variation, really speaking. So, in fact, in some of the higher poetry and music, it is very evident. After all, what is music? Music uses language. Even instrumental music as a language dimension. So every music which is in a way a formation of words also has a dimension that goes beyond words. So instrument. So it seems that in my opinion, the Vedic linguistics was far much more highly evolved than Paninian grammar. But the point is, Vedic language may not be adequate to write and to expound philosophical concepts. There is an element of mysticism in Vedic sound. And also the Vedic hermeneutics say the mantra should be interpreted in terms of spiritual and also in terms of the relationship with celestial meaning, and also in terms of the person, the feelings, the emotional structure of the person who chants the mantras. So, in reality, Vedic language laid a strong foundation for the very concept of higher music. So, the word sama, saman is the word. So, saman itself is nothing but the musical dimension of spoken word. So, of course, there is a statement. I forget. It may be Katyayana. He says, Saptaswara, Tristhana. The 7 Saptaswaras. Saptaswaras, and then Tristhanas and Ekonavimsarita. So, all the musical notations, when you employ them, when you utter Rigveda mantra, it becomes Saman. So this is very interesting, So when a word becomes part of a musical system, it begins to imply, it begins to indicate something far beyond what the real meaning of the word could imply. That's why people who don't know the language can still enjoy great music. But that is very sign of a great music. Somebody may not know the language, who may not understand the meaning of the words employed. If it is great music, then we can appreciate the musical dimension. Because there are 2 levels of understanding. One is the sound dimension, samanya, tadari visheshana. To give an example. Suppose you know the grammar of a piece of composition. When you listen to it, you interpret it in terms of a connoisseur of music who is knowledgeable about it. But suppose you are a total stranger, you are not hearing the words and meanings, but you are hearing all the music. So music goes beyond the written word. So there is samanya means the general, the transcendental dimension of music. Vishesha means, well, suppose you can, if you, Indian classical music, unless you know something about it, it is not exactly a very pleasant spectacle. When a musician shows some gestures which are not entirely pleasant to see It's almost a not a very pleasant spectacle. But if you know the music, you can enjoy every bit of gestures, which may appear very wild to a total stranger. But you enjoy the gesture, and you enjoy the way he's singing, the different. I'm myself not a musician, but still, this mention is in the Shankara Bhasha, it comes Samanya Visesha dimensions of music, it comes. But if you don't know anything about it, still you enjoy it if it contains great music. If you don't watch him, but listen to him, you can enjoy. If you watch him, the gestures are not exactly, it's not part of music. So there is a funny story about it. A little bit of humor will not be altogether without its use in this discussion, You see, a student went to a musician, and you can imagine a Hindustani musician or somebody, and so he wanted to learn the gestures first, music later. So the music teacher told him, you cannot learn like that. It should come automatically. When you learn music, hand gestures should come automatically. You don't learn gestures first and then music. No, it comes automatically. So, but you can think of gestures without music, how it will not be very pleasant to see. But when you see both together, it is absolutely wonderful for somebody who knows the music. But a total stranger listening to this in a radio or recording, if he may still be able to enjoy the musical dimension if it's really great music. Vedic sounds belong to that category. Vedic mantras have got this unique spiritual dimension. Spiritual is the only word to use in this context, as you can use in the context of great music. Great music has something spiritual about it, because the sound dimension is the transcendental aspect of the music. The word dimension, when you analyze the meaning of the word, actually there's something else. So this idea behind. So Vedic language belongs to the category of the transcendental dimension of language. That's why the students, young children, they memorize this with a lot of hand gestures called hasta mudras, and with a lot of gesture with their head also. So you can imagine, suppose you ask those students to make those gestures without chanting Vedas, they will consider it punishment. But when they chant it with gestures are absolutely no problem. That shows the nature of truly great music. Vedic mantras are great music, really. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. That's very helpful.
Yeah,
David, you're next.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. There you are.
Hello, Swami. I had a question about was Madhvacharya, was he how should I say, sort of like favored his own like devotees of Krishna, like so for instance we see modern Christians, or even that they think Jesus is the only savior,
that's true. Of course, not Krishna but Vishnu. Vishnu is the supreme Godhead for him. Now, in Chaitanya system, which is linked to Madhva system, philosophically speaking, they give more importance to Krishna, not Vishnu. Krishna is an incarnation of Vishnu in Hindu tradition, Hindu pantheon. But Madhvacharya gives importance to Vishnu. So, more or less like that. Maybe as a sharp reaction to Advaitic dry intellectualism that he found in some Advaitic schools at that time, his reaction was a sharp reaction to the dry intellectualism of Advaita. I mentioned, he was studying Ishtasiddhya Vimuktatman. He quotes from Ishtasiddhi in some of his books. Jayaditha also quotes from Ishtasiddhi. It's a well-known book in Advaita tradition. So yeah, more or less that is true. Of course, Madhvacharya, of course, I have to mention, Madhvacharya doesn't deny the possibility of other concepts of God as the Christian tradition does. This is an important thing. Madhvacharya himself, they don't deny, they never denied, they did not, somebody, those who worship God in different way will go to hell, nothing of the kind. He says, of course, he says that there are certain people who don't accept Vishnu. They go to hell, he says, Nitya Naraka Siddhanta. But you don't find that kind of Augustinian emphasis on, let's say, sin, the radical sinfulness, the inherited sinfulness, the entire humanity. That sort of you don't find in Madhva system. No, you don't find. He didn't go that far. Yeah. I'm talking about Augustine of Hippo. Yeah.
Did the worshippers of Mother Kali?
He did. Yeah. He didn't care for that. He did not criticize other deities, but he adhered to his own concept of God. And he was mostly busy writing books and arguing, so he did not have much interest in evangelical work or denying other deities. He didn't do that. So I often feel that Madhvacharya could have gone and read the great commentary by Shankaracharya on Vishnu Sahasranama. Shankaracharya wrote a great commentary on 1000 names of Vishnu. Its most sublime commentary was written by Shankaracharya, not Madhvacharya. So I be surprising in modern times when you think of that, how Madhvacharya could have taken the Kajars against Shankaracharya, who actually wrote such a sublime book, a commentary on 1000 holy names of his supreme deity, who is Vishnu. He would have become a disciple of Shankaracharya. To that. So it's very strange, there is a lot of... The same thing can be said about Ramanuja. Ramanuja living in Kanchi. Kanchi has got a great Divine Mother temple. Where Shankaracharya went, he purified, he also installed a Sri Chakra there, and there is a great monastery which Shankaracharya's disciples founded. According to many schools, he himself founded the Kanchi Shankara Math, very close to the temple of Divine Mother in Kanchi, Kamakshi temple. So Ramanuja had absolutely no reason to take up the Kajars against Shankara. They should have joined the ranks of Advaitins if they have read Shankaracharya's own works praising the glory of Divine Mother in Kanchi, or praising the glory of Vishnu in Vishnu Satpadi and Vishnu Sahasranama. Just imagine, Vishnu Sahasranama is a unique bhashya. Shankaracharya's great commentary on Vishnu Sahasranama. 1000 holy names of Vishnu. And he wrote a magnificent commentary. So these are interesting things if you look at the whole thing from a historical perspective. Okay, thank you.
Swami, one last point. If Madhvacharya and Ramanuja had not disagreed with Shankara, we wouldn't get the benefit of the class that you're teaching now, where you get to help us understand them.
Yeah, I'm very happy. In fact, I tell you, it is surprising to me when I find people like you sitting there listening to this. It shows, of course, it's a different context, shows the great interest that people have got for this comparative philosophical teachings, because these teachings they belong to the intellectual, I would say, cultural heritage of humanity. It would be wonderful if we can teachings. I'm not in that line, but somebody who could teach Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, Plotinus, and Porphyry, Neoplatonism. These are the... Unfortunately, after Augustine came, he himself was a Greek scholar. He was he studied in Alexandria, Augustine of Hippo. But since Augustine, the tradition of the great Greek learning took a backseat. Very, very the great Greek thinkers, the golden era of Western thought. Actually, yeah. So very
Thank
happy.
you, Swami.
They're very happy. Okay, any more question? Yeah, thank you. So thank you. So it is a great.
Mark's hand is up.
Anyone?
Mark.
Oh, Mark.
Yes,
Please,
yes.
yeah.
Mark is.
Mark, please, Mark. It's not. I'm not able to hear, Mark. You have to repeat.
Mark, you just muted yourself, so
Yeah.
you were unmuted. There you go.
Pranam, Swamiji.
Yeah.
Thank you for your lecture. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that this question is not too far off the subject matter, but I think it may be relevant to Vedanta.
Yeah.
I go to a Sai Baba temple here in Pleasanton,
Yeah.
and there's a book that was written about him at the beginning of the century. It's called Sri Sai Satcharita.
Sri,
Sai Satcharita.
oh yeah, Siddhi Sai Baba was a great mystic who lived in India
Right.
before Sai Baba.
Right.
Siddhi, yeah.
So I was reading this book today, and there's a part here that says, I'll just read it verbatim. It says, the saint was explaining a portion from the book
Yeah.
Vichar Sagar by Nishala Das, and it says a standard work on Vedanta.
Oh yeah,
And I've
Nischala
never
Das.
heard of it.
Yeah, Nischala
Can you
Das. Yeah.
enlighten us to
Yeah,
what
yeah,
that book's about?
yeah. Can you, Nischala Das, who wrote a well-known book on Vedanta in simple Hindi language, can you repeat the name of the title of the book?
Vichar Sagar.
Vicharasagar.
Vichar-
Vicharasagar. Vicharasagar, yeah. I mean the ocean of thoughts, what it means. Ocean of wisdom, let's say. So, Nischala Das was a great mystic who wrote a book in, I think, Hindi language, which is very popular in many parts of northern India, which actually introduced Vedantic teachings to the common people, because that was a time when only Sanskrit educated people could go into higher teachings of Vedanta. But Nischala Das, he produced a book in Hindi which actually opened the doors with common people to the mysteries of Hindu philosophy and mysticism. So it's a great work, yeah.
Sort of like the poet saints in Maharashtra, they wrote in Marathi rather than in Sanskrit for the common people.
Yeah, the Jnaneshwar, yeah, you're talking about?
Yeah, Yaneshwar.
Yeah, that's true. You find in different vernacular languages in India, the many books written on Vedanta. So Sant Jnaneshwar also was a great novel, a great mystic and author. Jnaneshwari is a well-known book. He wrote in an old style of Marathi language, one of the languages used in India. Very popular language, Bombay, all these big. Maharashtra is a big province. Marathi is a bit, it's an ancient language they are used. That's true. So these ideas got spread in different places. Madhvacharya's system is relevant because to study comparative philosophy. He was a great saint, he was a great devotee. But there was a time when great men, great scholars sat and wrote great dialectical books and enjoyed arguing and contradicting and refuting and again establishing a counter perspective, counterpoint. It's very interesting, But fortunately, India did not produce an Augustine. If there was an Augustine, he would have replaced everything with a very strong dogmatic theology. So theology could strangle the growth of independent philosophy. So if you read Madhva, if you read all this, you can find from 7th century BC, from Thales up to Porphyry and Philo and Plotinus and Neoplatonism, you find the golden era of philosophic systems. Later on, you have to wait for a very long time till Kant and to see the urge for independent thought in European philosophy. So this is important. Okay. So thank you for the
Maharaj, may I ask a follow-up question on that subject very quickly? I do have the impression that in many seminaries and yeshivas, the Judaic equivalent around the world, that comparative spiritual philosophy is discussed and debated very robustly, but maybe not with the heterogeneous freedom that you might see in Bellarmine or in other centers of study in India. I know that in rabbinical studies in yeshivas, they'll say, well, Rabbi this said that, and Rabbi that said this, and how do we reconcile those different points of view? And that is very robust unto this day.
I know, I heard about it.
And also in Christian seminaries and schools of theology, this happens. The general public doesn't get much access to that in their day-to-day spiritual life. And I'm wondering, because India is an exceptionally diverse and open place to discuss these things, it must be very advanced at places of monastic study to do comparative philosophical inquiry and to unravel it the way that you're doing in this class, or is it rare? I don't know. I imagine it's not rare.
There in India, you find there is absolutely no rigid opposition to any branch of studies. No opposition. And, well, I think in the tradition of Catholic religion, actually Catholic priests and monastics, they preserve the ancient Greek, Latin, intellectual tradition very well. But there was always the fear of something that may go against the received interpretation of the church. Though I had to remember the contribution the Catholic Church on different denominations of monastics in Catholic tradition, their contribution to music, to art, to architecture, to literature, and even philosophical studies. Even many of the great universities of Europe were founded by the Catholic monks and clergymen, that they were the custodians of intellectual heritage. But it seems till modern times, there was always some fear of some kind of persecution or excommunication if you somehow deviate from the path of the received interpretation. It's no more there any longer. That's the greatness of Catholic Church. You remember, and many of the clergymen were extremely well educated. And I tell you, there were great Catholic priests who studied Vedanta very well, mostly Jesuit priests, and with all sincerity, with a broad-minded approach, they were in India. And as for the Jewish tradition, as far as I understand, they had a very profound and ancient mystical dimension. There's an intellectual culture that predates Christianity even. So that goes far beyond the time of Christianity. So that's there, you're right. And one important point that they had an advantage over some other, both Christianity and Judaism had this unique advantage over some other Abrahamic traditions. I mean, they did not believe that it's a great crime and sin, a crime against man and sin against God, to deviate even to the slightest extent to the received interpretation of a word, a comma, or a full stop of a canon. They didn't have it. And also to declare that that kind of deviation is a blasphemy, to be punished in a very harsh fashion. They did not have it. Of course, there were, no doubt, but then they did practice to some extent. You can read about the burning of many scholars who translated Bible from Latin into some of the European languages, to Czechoslovakian language and so on. That's true. But then these ideas were not given, not articulated or written in their fundamental canonical literature. They were the work of the fanatical clergymen, but Christian tradition itself did not write down such rigid rules. You can have a new... See, I mean, how can you imagine King James translate... is the first King James version of the Bible. Can you imagine? It's a great revolutionary development in history of English language and literature. English usage especially. So I think they were free from that kind of extreme tribalistic view that the slightest deviation, a word, a comma, or a full stop from this ancient book is a great sin against God. It's to be punished. That idea never existed either in Judaism or Christianity or Buddhism or Hinduism. That is the advantage of, I think. That's okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, thank you. So, Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. We have
Recording stopped.
some announcement, please, some announcement. Wait a minute. We have, though we have started our summer recess from July to September 7, our class will continue. Please remember, our class on the foundational text of Indian philosophy, online Sunday evening class is 6 to 7:30 p.m. It will continue even during this summer recess. Okay, it will continue. Thank you. Just wanted to inform you. Okay, thank you. Namaskar.